Welcome, everybody. I'm Blake Munroe, joined right now by CJ Vogel. Going to talk a little baseball and also going to talk a little basketball with Gerry Hamilton in a little bit. But first, CJ, let's talk about one of the things that gets me most excited, Texas baseball, and obviously a lot to be excited about. 48 days away from that first pitch. What do you think, man?
Man, how can you not be excited, Blake? About 6 months ago, we were sitting here talking about, the new coaching staff, right? You steal essentially Jim Schlossnagle away from your biggest rival, a guy who's had success at several different programs before. You could consider him one of the top baseball coaches in all of America. Now he's wearing a Longhorn logo, and you're 7 weeks away from baseball being played once again for the Longhorns. I have to imagine that the vibe inside the locker room is completely different, that there are some guys that are very excited for this coaching staff, maybe a change of scenery without having to part from the 40 acres, but also just the wealth of knowledge that not just Coach Schlossnagle is bringing, but Max Wiener as well. That pitching staff is something I'm very excited about, especially in the back end when you start considering some of the arms that they added out of the portal. We'll talk about that here in a minute, Blake, but right now I have to imagine that this is going to be a completely different looking team and ball club moving forward.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, talking about the vibe, because I had spoke to someone very recently and asked, what gives you a lot of hope or a lot of faith in the team this year, especially going into the SEC and, playing a lot of these very, very tough teams. And they said that just an overall vibe reset, how they feel like this new staff is really going to pull out the potential of a lot of these players that we saw glimpses of in the past. But, we never saw the full potential of a lot of these guys. And so they really feel like this coaching staff is going to be the one to do it. And speaking of that, we got some battles, man, on our hands here. Texas fans wondering at certain positions. The outfield right now is locked down for the most part, 2 out of 3. You got Max Ballou and then Easton Winfield. But center field, CJ. Center field's going to be the interesting one. Will Gasparino, obviously everyone pretty much, if you're familiar with Texas baseball, you're familiar with Gasparino. But he seems to be battling it out with Tommy Farmer for the center field position. And to me, that's going to be a key battle this spring.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting, right? And talking about good vibes, good changes in the locker room, I don't think there's anybody on this roster right now that might benefit more from this change of coaching staff than Will Gasparino, right?
Yep.
Maybe a roller coaster freshman campaign. We saw obviously some really impressive highlights, but also there were some lulls. And I think that's part of being a freshman at the college level. But Blake, you also mentioned a few months ago, Gasparino didn't necessarily go out and play in the college leagues, right, in the fall. He stuck around campus. He tried to get his swing right, maybe work on some techniques, some fundamentals a little bit more in Austin. I think this new coaching staff is going to be very beneficial for him, but also Tommy Farmer is very interesting because that was another highly touted freshman a year ago. Got 20 at-bats, didn't see a whole lot of play time, but certainly has the tools to make this one interesting. And look, you mentioned him in a battle right now at center field, one that we saw Gasparino start basically 75 or 80% of the games a year ago at. That should tell you a little bit about his development, how he's coming along behind the scenes as well. But Blake, there's more than just one position battle as well. I'll let you talk about the 2 others that are going on right now.
We'll go from the outfield to the infield. And, man, let's start at third base because we're talking about highly touted freshmen. Well, there's a chance that a highly touted freshman may start at third base. Of course, that freshman being Adrian Rodriguez out of Flower Mound. Go a little bit more in depth on him in a second, but he's battling Casey Borba. So yet another one, but I'm curious to see if the freshman's going to pull away there.
That'll be really interesting because, again, that was a guy that when Texas added him to the class and he got to campus, I got a text that said that was one of the toughest outs, toughest at-bats that I've seen in all of DFW. That came from a coach up in the Dallas area that was very familiar with him. Look, switch hitting middle infielders that can play the corners, rare to find, Blake, and when you see how competitive he is at the plate, I mean, it's going to be tough to keep out of the lineup once he kind of scratches that itch as well. I'm excited for him. That might be the number one guy that I'm kind of eager to see kind of fill his role, if you will. Mm-hmm. And if he's pushing, a veteran guy like Casey Borba at the third base position, you got to be excited. But even moving across the diamond to first base, another newcomer, Jaquay Stewart from Northwest Florida State. He's pushing a familiar name as well. That'll be Kimball Schlusler at first base. I think right now, Blake, we're kind of seeing a three-way go at first base, DH, and catcher with Schlusler, Rylan Galvan, and obviously Jaquay Stewart. That'll be really interesting. But right now, that first base battle is also one to keep an eye on too.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to Rodriguez just for a second, I was told by someone that they thought he was the best freshman position player, and really, I mean, that should come as no surprise. He's also a switch hitter, and so Texas seems to have really big plans for him. And I really think he'll be a household name before it's all said and done for Texas fans when it comes to baseball, for sure.
I couldn't agree more. Look, again, you look at his success in high school. He hit 430 in high school at Flower Mound. And Flower Mound's one of the biggest, it's the equivalent of an Allen or a Duncanville in the high school ranks. Of course, he was a top 200 draft pick as well. So elite shortstop, now can move over to third base as well. Be a guy that with his glove, with his bat, going to find a way into this lineup 100%, I believe, Blake.
Yeah, either way, both whoever wins, Borba, Rodriguez, some big shoes to fill there from Peyton Powell, who has departed the program. But that's really going to be an interesting one. And again, just like you said, first base with Stewart and Schusler. So a lot to keep an eye out as far as position battles go. And then let's talk about pitching because, I think the last time we recorded a video, and we get asked all the time, whether it's Coffee and Football or, the Longhorn live streams, or even over on ontexasfootball.com. Well, what's pitching going to look like? What's pitching going to look like? And especially early in the fall, that was extremely hard to really give somebody an answer on. And now I would always say, ask me in a couple of months. Ask me in a couple of months. And I think that the picture of the pitchers is really starting to take shape. And I actually want to start with what you were told recently regarding a certain somebody, and I'm going to let you start with that.
Yeah, all right. I like it because this really got me excited as well. Look, Texas added 10 players out of the portal. One name that was tossed to me as someone that Texas fans really need to be aware of is Ruger Riojas, the reliever out of UTSA. Really impressive arsenal of pitches. He had 26 appearances last year, 7 saves for UTSA. A guy who his strikeout numbers maybe aren't necessarily going to wow you. He had a 1.09 K per 9 in 2024 for UTSA. But Blake, when you watch him pitch, it's the arsenal and it's his ability to create weak contact that I think really suit well for the back end of the rotation. I was told this is a guy that Texas fans are really going to take a liking to, and I think they're absolutely going to take a liking to anybody in the back end of that bullpen that shows us any sign of consistency, because it's been a rocky road over the past few years in that bullpen. But right now, that was a name that was passed to me as someone that is really going to impress when this season comes rolling around and over in the next 2 months or so.
Definitely. And, one of the things I think that they're trying to figure out with him is, do we use him all at once in a starting role, or can we use him multiple times throughout the week and, and come in, provide some of that reliever spot. But yeah, last I heard, he was up to 95-mile-an-hour fastball, and they were working on his strength. So the sky's the limit for him. And one other thing that I think is really important to note, I was also told that he may end up being the best pitcher of them all this season. So
how about that?
High praise coming in early for the UTSA transfer.
No, that's huge. And of course, you can never go wrong with velocity at the back end of your rotation. Back into your bullpen, 95 there. You start looking around at who are some of these other guys Texas added. And let's go through them just real quick, because I think Aiden Moffitt might be that truly unknown for Texas when it comes to a guy from the portal that they added from LSU, throws upper 90s. But look, 1.77 whip at LSU isn't going to get the job done. When you play SEC ball, you got to get that lower. He was a guy that maybe didn't have as much command around the strike zone, had 12 walks and 17 2/3, but starting to look around as well. I think there are some other names that Texas fans should get familiar with, and that's, Connor McCreary out of South Carolina. Blake, talk to the OTF followers a little bit more about him as well.
Yeah, so as you said, he came out of South Carolina, Fastball sounds like it's up to about 94, 95. He really relies on it. And he also has a cutter that sticks between 85 to 87. I don't know that he'll be one of your starters, but he's definitely going to be a guy that will be in heavy rotation. You'll probably see him a lot this spring and hopefully into the summer, as well. But I heard a lot of high praise for him. And big guy, 6'6", 225, as you said, man, that's just a big dude.
It absolutely is. So that gives me some reason for optimism in the bullpen. But, yes, Blake, of course, the bullpen doesn't mean a whole thing if you're down 7 runs in the 5th inning, right? So what can Texas fans expect from the starters? Because I think that's one of those, maybe not so much uncertainties, but there are some moving pieces right now that I think need some answers. You got anything about us on the guys that might be taking the hill on Friday and Saturdays?
Yeah, so from what I've told, and again, it's still early, and we got 48 days for this to change. But the left-handed pitcher out of Indiana State, Jared Spencer, looks like he could be an early weekend guy. And then along with, and this is a name that Texas fans might be somewhat familiar with, but Luke Harrison. He's a left-handed pitcher, redshirt junior. He's been at Texas. But here's the deal, TJ. In 2023, season-ending surgery. So didn't see him at all. So I'm a little bit in 22. And then in 24, he came back 13 games, but, still kind of rehabbing from the surgery, a very slow start there. But it sounds like he has had an absolutely phenomenal summer into the fall. And from what I'm told, he could nail either that Friday or Saturday job as well. Or Sunday.
I mean, look, anytime you can show the development of a guy that's been here before, the new staff comes in and you see the instant change in his trajectory as an arm, I think that would go right into the arsenal of that of Max Wiener as well. And Blake, that helps with recruiting when you're able to say, hey, we've had this guy on campus, and it wasn't until really this new staff arrived that you can say, look at the changes, look at the development. To put this in a football term, look, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, those two guys took a tremendous leap forward in their game with Kenny Baker teaching them the new techniques on the defensive line. But speaking of recruiting, Blake, and I know that's been a hot topic since this new staff has arrived. Look, we've talked about Adrian Martinez, Kason Cunningham, the 2025 shortstop out of San Antonio, one of the top players in all of the country, the top kid in the state of Texas, one that Texas is very excited about, a Team USA honoree as well. He highlights some of the biggest flips that Texas has had since this staff has taken over. There are certainly many more big-time additions going on to these Texas 25 and 26 classes that are currently underway.
Yeah, definitely. Schloss there for a while, CJ. He's wearing me out. It seemed like every time we would, break a commitment or whatever, it was like, all right, time to get ready for the next one. I mean, he went on a run there for a couple of weeks that was just legendary. Pretty much.
It was almost like you post one, well, get ready to draft 3 others because they're in the wait.
100%. I mean, and there were times when that was really the deal. Like, you post one, and then before you'd even get that one done, boom, another one would happen. But man, I think the really big storyline right now, number 1 player in the nation, he visits campus. I think he came in on like a Friday night, Saturday morning type deal. And by the following week, and we're talking about Grady Emerson out of Argyle, shortstop, just he committed, was, previously at TCU, decommitted from there. But man, a huge pickup. And I already know what you're going to say, CJ. Well, he's the number 1 player in the nation. What's the chances that he ends up on campus? And from what I hear, the chances are a lot higher than previous number 1 players. And, a lot of that, from what I'm told, he's just a very mature kid. He sees the big picture. The people around him are advising him well. Anything can happen. So it is important to go get developed. It is important to go get an education. So I think that maturity, along with a couple of other factors, are going to play a big role. And don't be surprised if he's not on the 40 acres. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Now, look, you get big wins. You get those 5-star caliber wins on the diamond. It's always a roll of the dice whether or not they get to the 40 acres or they go start somewhere in Arizona or Florida for their professional careers to be, right off the bat. The best way that you can ensure that you at least have a chance to land these kids on campus one day is to win their recruitment out of high school. And so to get these kids committed and to at least be in the running for what their future will entail is huge. And look, Texas, there are certainly some guys over the last decade or so that they would have loved to have had on campus. Look, Brett Beatty, probably that number one guy. Simeons Woods Richardson, I believe is his name as well, Blake. Texas would have loved to have had all these guys. But at least now you have a coaching staff that can develop, recruit well, and can piece it all together to win and get these kids on campus like we've seen already with Adrian Rodriguez.
Yeah, for sure. And 20 kids, CJ, already committed in the 2026 class. That's crazy to think about. And I'm told that they're not done yet. And still after some of them, big time guys with a real shot to land them. So got to stay tuned there. But it blows my mind that they already have 20. And, these aren't 20 guys that are down, just anybody. I mean, these are like elite, especially that top half, man. They're an elite company. It blows my mind how well they've recruited, especially without even having played the season.
Right. And look, a lot of those commits, Blake, flipped from Texas A&M. They flipped a couple from TCU and Texas Tech. If they weren't going to Texas, they would be guys that Texas would have to play. But I'll leave this with you, Blake, because, look, we've talked about it, 48 days away. And there's a lot of excitement, right? This is a coaching staff that's been there, done that, built TCU from the ashes, took A&M to heights that they've never seen really in any sport. Now they're here in Austin. And we still got some time to figure out what the actual lineup, what the actual rotation will be. But what's your general vibe about this team, this program, and the trajectory that it's headed on moving forward?
I honestly feel a lot better about it than I have in a while. That's for sure. I mean, we've done countless videos where we've talked about, the elite coaching that Texas is receiving and especially about to receive as baseball season's right around the corner. But it just seems like the sky's the limit. I mean, you're recruiting at an elite level. You know that these guys can develop at an elite level. They're now in the premier baseball conference. I don't think there's anything, it's the perfect storm. There's really nothing that could go more better, I guess, for lack of a better term, than how it is going right now. And if you're a Texas baseball fan, whether you're a diehard or just a casual Texas baseball fan, you have a lot to be excited about. I expect a lot of sold out games this upcoming season. You and we've gone over the schedule, especially that SEC slate, and just so many good games coming to Austin, so many good games on the road. Just like I said, a ton to be excited about if you're a Longhorn baseball fan right now.
Yeah, of course, opening day for Texas, February 14th in the Shriners Children's College Showdown against Louisville. Plenty to be looking forward. And Blake, of course, I know this is on Texas football, but we'll be having some on Texas baseball conversations before then as well.
Definitely. And I believe old rival Texas Tech is in that as well, aren't they?
They are, yep. And so Texas starts that weekend with Louisville, Ole Miss, and a former Big 12 foe, Oklahoma State as well. So it should be a pretty solid weekend to see just kind of how things are shaping out for this team moving forward.
And you said February 14th.
That's the one. Jot it down.
Well, my wife's going to be really happy about that. I'll tell you right now, CJ.
Hey, you have to do the 999 challenge, Blake.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, CJ. I'm going to bring on Gerry Hamilton now, and we'll be talking to you soon about more baseball. All right, everybody. Well, we just talked baseball with CJ Vogel. Now I'm joined by Gerry Hamilton, where we're going to talk a little basketball, both men and women's. And Gerry, I got to ask, is this the toughest 5-game opening stretch, conference play-wise, for the Longhorns that you've seen?
Woo, yeah. I mean, they got one warm-up game left, right, in Northwestern State on Sunday, and they're finally getting healthier. So Trey Johnson will return. Jason Kent, barring a setback, those guys will play on Sunday against Northwestern State to close out preseason play. And so Texas is 10-2. They'll get to 11-2 with a win over Northwestern State. And then Blake, you nailed it. This is a gauntlet, man. I can't remember a tougher 5-game opening stretch of conference play since I've been covering Texas. I mean, just so people know where this is at, you start off conference play January 4th at A&M. And for those that haven't been keeping up, A&M's ranked 13 in the AP poll. Then you host Auburn, who's ranked number 2, January 7th. If that wasn't enough, then you host Rick Barnes in Tennessee, January 11th, currently ranked number 1. And then you go on the road to Oklahoma, who is ranked 12 currently and undefeated. And then you close out that easy stretch at Florida, who, by the way, is undefeated and ranked number 6 in the country. I cannot recall 5 tougher games to start conference play ever than this for Texas basketball. And the crazy thing about this is I'm not sure they'll be favored in any of those games. And in fact, they won't be favored in any of those games.
That's crazy.
They could go 1-4 and actually play pretty well on this stretch. They could go 2-3 and play exceptionally well. They could play 3-2 and be otherworldly. I mean, that's kind of what it's going to take. As far as the team looked at, they were shooting a 3 at a very high rate. They're doing what they were supposed to do as far as shooting the 3 on this team. Jordan Pope, obviously coming off a 42-point game. Trey Johnson back healthy. This is a team that's shooting over 40% from 3. And I had 38% peg for them. They're going above and beyond that. Not quite as good at the free throw line. This should be a 76% free throw shooting team. They're a little low right now on that. And they need Jason Kent back. I mean, look, the guards are really good on this Texas team. And I think they're kind of finding their niche. They're finding their role. I think Rodney Terry, Frank Haith are getting comfortable with all these guys and putting these pieces together. Hopefully this offense, because this has to be an offensive team. That's where this team has to win. They have to be able to go score 80 points, 75, 80 points against these really good SEC opponents. Go on the road and score 72, 74. Because the level of this conference, you can play really good defense and teams are going to score 70 to 75 on you. You have to go be able to put up 2 more than that on really good opponents offensively. That's just where this comes out for Texas. Caden Shedrick's an improved player, but this return of Jason Kent to go with Kaluma. We've seen Nick Cody play pretty well at times. Zarek Onyema has played okay at times, pretty well at times. But it's really going to come down to this guard play of Jordan Pope, Trey Johnson, Tremont Mark, Julian Larry, and Kendall Weaver. Texas has a strong backcourt. They have to score the ball really effectively, and they have to keep the ball moving. And this offense has to cut with purpose. It has to be offense with purpose is what Texas has to have in conference play. They can't be easy to defend because then they turn around on the defensive end. The teams they're playing are not going to be easy to defend. So you have to make your opponent work as hard as they're making you work on the defensive end. And if Texas does that, they have the ability to score enough points in the SEC in a conference that's better than the Big 12 this year. I mean, this is a tremendously tough conference. If you go 500 in this league, you're assured to make the NCAA tournament. And I would say there may be a team that goes a couple of games under 500 in this league and makes the NCAA tournament. And that's what Texas and all these teams that are up against and aren't ranked in that top 10, top 12 in the country.
Well, that's actually something I was going to ask you real quick before we switch gears and talk about women's, is looking back at, non-conference play and knowing what you know now, what would you consider a successful record for Texas in conference play this year?
Oh, man. So that would be, let me do my math real quick here.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah. 2 games under 500.
Okay.
I think, or even, or 500. The issue is when you get outside these first 5 games, okay, you have Missouri and you have A&M at home. A&M's still going to be ranked top 25 team no matter when you play them. Then you're at Ole Miss. Chris Beard. Hello, Chris Beard. Welcome back. Then you're at LSU, who's just not playing great, but it's still a road game. Then you have Arkansas and John Calipari. Then you're at Vanderbilt. Then you have Alabama and Kentucky back-to-back in Austin, at South Carolina, at Arkansas, Georgia, one of the surprise teams in the SEC, at Mississippi State, who may be an NCAA tournament team, possibly, and Oklahoma at home. That is a brutal schedule, Blake. And so if you go 500, I think you've done really well on this schedule. If you go 2 games below 500, I think you're probably going to make the NCAA tournament on this schedule.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, let's switch gears to a team that's had quite a bit of success so far, and that's the women's. They're 12-1, Gerry. Of course, 1 non-conference game left just like the men's, and then they'll open up conference play in the month of January. But what's your thoughts on them overall from what you've seen this season?
I think so. I think they're kind of molding this team back together. I say back together because Rory Harmon had the ACL last year, right? So Madison Booker's back playing on the wing. She's added a 3-point shot to her game, and she's playing at a very high level, like top 3 pick in the WNBA draft level whenever she comes out. The key for this team, and Vic loves this team. We've had them on here. They play really hard. They play really well in the defensive end, as you'd expect with a Vic Schaefer team, very similar to a Rick Barnes team. But play really well in the defensive end, compete really hard. A team that fans can get behind because they play hard. They have some toughness. Shea Holly's very tough. Rory Harmon, they have toughness. They have some enough playmaking with Rory Harmon. Bree Preston, the backup point guard, the freshman from the Atlanta area, is an absolute jet fast. Jordan Lee's had some good games shooting it off the bench. They haven't really been at full capacity this year because the Michigan transfers had some injury issues. So she hasn't really even Layla Philly. She hasn't really even gotten it going like we expected when she transferred to Texas. But the bigs are playing well. They have enough size. I think they have enough toughness on the interior to defend in the SEC. To me, it's going to come down to 2 things with the Texas women to maximize this season, because they're going to play well defensively. Rory Harmon can make plays with the ball. Madison Booker can go get you a bucket when you need it. It's going to come down to shooting a 3 and turnovers. Notre Dame threw a zone at Texas, and Texas turned it over 23 times. And Vic Schaefer is on our show and said unacceptable against the zone defense. That it's turnovers playing against the zone, because teams may zone Texas because they only shoot 29.2 from 3 right now. They need to get that number up. If they can get up into the 32, 33% area in SEC play, that would be nice to see, because my concern is, can you zone them up, or can you just play off Texas if they make enough threes to beat you in those games against the ranked teams? Because the first 4 now, it's not as hard as Texas' first 5 in the men's side, right? But on the women's side, the first 4 is at Oklahoma, who's ranked 9, Arkansas at home, Alabama, who's ranked 20th, and then at South Carolina, who obviously is number 2. So, again, these are brutally tough conferences in basketball. And the men have the toughest 5-game stretch I've ever seen to start conference play. But the women, on the women's side, they have, we're starting at rivals in the SEC, at A&M for the men, at OU for the women. And OU women are ranked 9, Texas ranked 5 or 6, depending on the poll you look at. The difference there between the men and the women are going to be favored in all these games, except at South Carolina.
Definitely. And hey, a quick note on Shea Holly. She only needs 4 more wins, Jerry, to become the winningest player in program history.
Look, she's heart and soul. She plays so hard on both ends of the floor. She brings so much to this program. When she was signed with Texas, everybody talked about, she's a UT legacy. And I think, people miss that she pours heart and soul into this. I mean, she's the hardest worker, arguably, in the program. And she brings a toughness to this team and a winning mentality to this team that is always going to be underrated, because the best role players have to bring the toughness and the winning mentality. And she does that on both ends of the floor.
Definitely. Well, before we get out of here, I know everyone wants to know about Aaliyah Chavez, the nation's #1 player. And I got what I think is a pretty solid update just the other day. I was told it's a matter of not a matter of if, but a matter of when she signed. So still don't know a date. Obviously, we didn't see anything from National Signing Day, but as we know, I mean, she didn't have to do it then.
Right.
But looking really good for Texas right now.
She happened to have 53 a couple of days ago too in a tournament, 9 threes, I think, in the first half. So she's averaging about 35 a game. She's on pace for 175 made threes again. She's going to have some national records to her name. One of the very best shooters the state of Texas has ever produced on the women's or men's side. There would be a huge win for Texas if they beat out Oklahoma and Texas Tech.
Well, good stuff, Gerry. Thank you for joining me today. And thank you all for tuning in. And for Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you next time.